Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and continuing on with Snow White Movie Week, and yep, that's right. As I teased in the last review video, you know, and you read the title, yes, the next Snow White live-action film, and yeah, this being the second to last Snow White film that I'm reviewing, yeah, because, well, coincidentally, that same year, when Mirror, Mirror came out, we would get another live-action Snow White film, and actually, that year in 2012, we got 3 live-action Snow White films. There was Mirror, Mirror, there was this, and the third one was a Spanish Snow White film, which I never knew about. I was never aware of this until, yeah, of course, you know, I'm talking about this, I learned about this, yeah, that was pretty interesting that, yeah, 2012 being the Snow White year, I guess. I mean, heck, 10 years later, we had gotten a year where, yeah, there was a lot of Pinocchio stuff that came out, you see? Because, yeah, there's a good example right there. But, overall, yes, this one that came out a couple months after Mirror, Mirror, and I remember very well when Mirror, Mirror and this other live-action Snow White film came out, and I think it was a bit confusing, wasn't it? I mean, because, wait a minute, you know, hearing about this Snow White live-action film, but there's also this, you know what I'm saying? And, yeah, and also, coincidentally, Lily Collins, she was considered and auditioned for the part of Snow White in this live-action Snow White film, but of course, Kristen Stewart got the part, and, well, eventually, Lily Collins did get to play Snow White, but in that other Snow White film, but yes, that's right. I am finally reviewing, from 2012, from Universal Pictures, Snow White and the Huntsman. Yes, Snow White and the Huntsman, the second live-action Snow White film that came out in 2012, and yeah, like I said, I was well aware of this other live-action Snow White film that, you know, had come out that same year, and I do recall, yeah, like, I think seeing a few, like, stilled shots and maybe one of the trailers, but yeah. And I'm glad to have finally gotten around to this, and I gotta say, and be completely honest, as I always am with, you know, reviewing movies and such, I actually liked Snow White and the Huntsman, and golly, 48% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, is it really this bad? To me, I don't think so. And, you know, almost like how I felt with Mirror, Mirror, you know? But, yeah, Snow White and the Huntsman, it's interesting how this live-action Snow White film tells the story with the titled character, but alongside with her, the Huntsman, and how the Huntsman has a big part in this movie, and, well, and kind of like, you know, how in, say, Mirror, Mirror, at a certain point, we had Snow White wielding a sword and such. Oh, yeah, this Snow White, for sure, yeah. I thought that, you know, with what the film had to offer, with its story from beginning to end, Rupert Sanders' direction to this, the visual style to it, and the set and style to this Snow White live-action film, and with a great cast of talents, and good action, good visuals, and, you know, with how the forests and, you know, the kingdoms look and such. Great music and score to this, and some of the songs that are in this film. Yeah, just, I was having a good time with this. And, like I said, I quite liked it, and I don't really see this being that bad. You know, despite what, you know, like, say, what Rotten Tomatoes and anybody else and, you know, the critics, what they have to say about it. To me, I liked it, so, yeah. And I'm sure some of you did as well. Just overall, Snow White and the Huntsman, it's not bad at all. It's quite enjoyable, entertaining, and, you know, with this kind of action that happens in Snow White and with the story's direction. Just, yeah, overall, I think it's really good. Okay, so, as always, for me, read the description / the story. Queen Ravenna, yeah, I think I'm saying that right, who seized control of her kingdom by marrying and killing its rightful ruler, needs the life force of young maidens to maintain her beauty. However, to become truly immortal, Ravenna must consume the heart of her stepdaughter, Snow White. Snow escapes, and Ravenna dispatches a huntsman to capture her. But Snow, the huntsman, and a rebel army join forces to destroy Ravenna and restore the balance of life and death. Okay, so with that out of the way, getting into the film itself. Yeah. And by the way, because, as I mentioned, this being a Universal Pictures film, I seem to recall reading that Universal got in trouble and got sued by Disney because Snow White, her name being in the title of this movie, and, because Disney owning the rights and use of Snow White's name, because of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. If you know about this, but I don't know. I mean, I think that Snow White's name being in the title, makes sense because, just what other title could they think of? I don't know. I mean, But anyways, so again, Universal Pictures and, starting off with Once Upon a Time, and the narrator's voice, sounds very familiar, and because whom the narrator plays on screen in this movie. But basically, because we start off seeing this queen out in the backyard, I guess you could say, of her kingdom, and longing for a daughter, and hoping and wishing that her daughter could, her skin could be white as snow, black, her hair black as a raven, lips red as the rose, and so on. Even when she goes up to a rose and, pricking her finger on it and drops of blood and stuff like that. And at one point, and as the narrator continues, the queen gives birth to a daughter. And the daughter being named Snow White. And Snow White's mother, as she's credited, but also being the queen slash wife of the king, being played by Liberty Ross, who was then the wife of the film's director. The king of Snow White and the husband and such, that was King Magnus. That's him, being played by Noah Huntley. Snow White having grown, and young Snow White being played by young Raffi Cassidy. I'm pretty sure that I might have seen her before in a couple of other stuff, but and it seems as though that Snow White's mother it seems as though she's starting to grow sick and such. And there's even a moment where Snow White shows her mother this bird that she rescued, and of course, as we all know, and this being a part of the character of Snow White, her being very kind and sweet to the forest animals and stuff like that, and Snow White's mother knowing that she has good heart and so on. But unfortunately, next winter, Snow White's mother sadly passed away, and this really affected, not just affected young Snow White, but also it really affected the king, and taking advantage of him, the grief and such. And even at one point, this dark army showed up and luring the king into battle, and thus, a battle that happens where, the king and his men take on the dark army, and sure enough, because they defeat them once and for all, but there's one survivor, and this survivor that they discover in this coach is a prisoner, And that turns out to be this beautiful blonde woman whom the king lays his eyes upon, like, just like falls in love with her instantly and with her beauty. And by the next day, he marries her, and she becomes the next queen, and thus being the stepmother of Snow White. And that being Ravenna, of course, yeah. And if it's not obvious where this is going, and when, yeah, the king mistakenly, but how is he really supposed to know? It's not his fault that he, marrying this woman whom would turn against him instantly, and what she would do to the kingdom. And there was a moment between Ravenna and Snow White where, telling Snow White that, she cannot really, take her mother's place, and sensing the feeling that, yeah, because, she has good heart, and, the connection that they might have, as mother and stepdaughter, yeah. But not really, because, yeah, after they get married, them spending some alone time, and, well, Ravenna starting to make this speech about men overpowering women and stuff like that, them using women, and she's doing something to the king, like, he's kind of, like, choking and such. Then she gets on top of him, and she kills him instantly, with a knife and such. And now that the king is dead, well, she brings in her own army, including her brother, Finn, being played by Sam Spruell. If I am pronouncing his last name right, Spruell? And I know I've probably seen him before in other stuff, but yeah. So yeah, the queen now starting to take over and to take the throne to herself, and by killing and executing all those who serve under the late king. And there's a moment where young Snow White discovers her late father's body, and when the queen, sees her, and, well, Snow White makes a run for it. Not to mention that early on, Snow White, having a good friend, which being William, because, yeah, them being friends, as kids, and young William being played by Xavier Atkins, yeah. I think I've seen him before as well, yeah. And, like, there was a moment where young William was offering Snow White an apple, but he took it to himself and eating it. Just, kind of a mean joke, but, yeah. But, anyways, but that's kids for you sometimes. Even if, like, for Snow White and William, they're good friends, but yeah. Anyways, so yeah, again, those that are loyal to the king, then being executed, all except for some of them. Thankfully, Snow White is almost rescued by young William and his father, which being Duke Hammond. And unfortunately, Snow White was, caught by, the Queen's army, and unfortunately, young William and his father, and those that, escaping the kingdom, they weren't able, they lost Snow White, and there was really nothing they could do, and they just had to keep fleeing. Well, the Queen, at one point, having a magic mirror being brought in, and yeah, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And the magic mirror in this, like, I gotta say, like, the way that the magic mirror is done in Snow White and the Huntsman, the visual and such to the mirror, is very interesting, because it's this, like, it looks like, it's almost like this symbol, this gold symbol, and something emerges out of it, this, like, and this, like, a golden cloak covering whatever it is underneath. That's the best way I can put at it. And the magic mirror is credited as Mirror Man, and Mirror Man being played by Chris Obie. Yeah. And Mirror Man telling the Queen that, well, she is fairest of them all, but giving the Queen a heads up and warnings and such, and, because, and most notably, she may not stay the fairest of them all and remain beautiful forever. Just, yeah. But also, a moment where the Queen, well, the survivors, that have not been executed yet, well, yeah, because the Queen's not going to let them off the hook, except for young Snow White. The others, to the sword, as she commands, and yeah, all the remaining survivors, under the loyalties, love and respect for the king, yeah, they sadly meet their demise. And as for Snow White, well, she had her brother take young Snow White to the dungeon, and for a couple of years, her remaining in the dungeon, I would presume that, they fed her well, but yeah, even though it's not mentioned and we don't see it on screen, how else would she have survived all that time in the dungeon? And yeah, and fast forward, and the next time we see Snow White, her grown up as a beautiful girl, and Snow White being played by Kristen Stewart. Yes. And I gotta say, Kristen Stewart was pretty good at playing the titled character. And Kristen Stewart, a great actress she is, and of course I'll always remember her best, and one of the first movies I had seen her in was in Zathura. But of course she'd be also most known for, well, Twilight, duh, but more than that, come on. But yeah, what she brings to the performance of Snow White, and how this Snow White variant is done, is pretty good. I mean, of course it has to stay true to the character of Snow White, certain details and elements to her, but at the same time, still be different, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, especially with what happens to her, and as the film proceeds, and up to the climax, and when she becomes a fighter. So yeah. Anyways, so yeah, again, Snow White, who had been living in the dungeon for the rest of her life when she grew up, and even managing to make fire, because there's a fireplace, and praying to the Lord, our Father, who art thou in heaven, etc. And there's a moment where a prison neighbor, I guess best way to put it, is thrown right next door to Snow White's cell, and that being Greta. Yeah, Greta being played by Lily Cole. And, Snow White asking who she is, and the information that Snow White gets from Greta, that the Queen, bringing in the females of the village, and, the Queen has a reason for, bringing in the females and the maidens, and even as I read in the description / the story, and Greta realizing that Snow White is the daughter of the late king, because Snow White asked, if William is alive, and yeah, and most notably, William's father, King Duke, King Duke Hammond, because by that point, yeah, him being king and such, but yeah, anyways. And more moments that we get with the Queen, like, there was a weird, interesting moment, I wouldn't say weird, but I don't know, like, where she takes, like, a bath in, what is it, milk or something? The movie doesn't even establish that. But, it's visually nicely done, because and can't forget to mention that Queen, now she's Queen Ravenna being played by good old Charlize Theron, and, again, no disappointment. Charlize Theron in Snow White and the Huntsman was no disappointment as well. Yeah. What Charlize Theron brings to Ravenna in Snow White and the Huntsman, just really good, because, man, Ravenna, she can have her moments where she can go psychotic and, shouting and such. Yeah, she's really good at that. And there's another moment where Ravenna, confronts two robbers, or those who ambushed and such, have something to do with supplies, and and I'm pretty sure, because it has to be them right here, because there's Thomas being played by Mark Wingate, and Ian, if I'm saying that right, being played by Jamie Blackley. They're father and son, and they hijacked and they ambushed and such, and this having to do with them being loyal to King Hammond and so on, but also still in loyalty to the late King Magnus. Well, the queen interrogating them and kind of torturing the son and almost going for his heart. And keep in mind, because we learn as the film proceeds that, Revena has dark magic to her. She's magical, and the certain types of magic and spells that she can do, just, yeah, very scary and dark. You know, also, there was one moment where she was feasting on birds. Dead. They were already dead, and just, oh my gosh. I remember when I watched that, I was like, geez, and yeah, it really shows like how psychotic this lady is, you know? And again, him torturing the son and the father, you know, wanting this to stop and such, and yeah, and ultimately, because what happens next is the son does try to kill the queen, but he fails. He did stab her, but she's immune by what happened to her, and yeah, ultimately she does finish him off, and allowing the father to live, and having him be sent back to the kingdom of King Hammond and such, and to have him mention what has just happened, and yeah, with the queen, his encounter with the queen and so on. And to speed things up, because as I mentioned, Greta being thrown right next door to Snow White in the dungeons, well, Greta at one point is brought in, meeting face-to-face with the Queen. And what the Queen does to Greta, well, as I read in the description / the story, taking her youth and such, sucking it out of her, literally. And as she does this, her hair starts to turn white and so on. Thankfully, and I was kind of thinking, like, is she gonna die from this? But thankfully, no, she doesn't, because once the queen is finished with her, Greta's thrown back into the dungeon, and Snow White wondering if she's okay, and just, yeah, but there's no response yet. And then, there's a moment where Snow White is greeted by, I get, like, the same breed of birds that Snow White encountered when she was young, and she saved one of them. And they're basically helping her. They guide her out, looking out through the window of her dungeon cell, and having to spot a loose nail, and she grabs for it. Meanwhile, there was a moment where Revena went to her magic mirror once again, and yeah, asking again, whom is the fairest of them all? And yeah, Mirror Man breaks the news to the queen, and to put it this, where Snow White is now to be the fairest of them all, and could basically take the queen's place, and yeah, and the queen does not like this at all, and summoning Finn, which just so happens he was right there getting a peek on what his sister was doing. Apparently he can't see it from his point of view, but only she can. Well, and us, the audience watching the movie, can as well. Only she can see Mirror Man. So, yeah, the queen ordering Finn to go fetch Snow White, because, yeah, she's obviously going to do something to her and have her be finished, and, yeah, because Snow White, again, according to Mirror Man, could beat her. Yeah, because of her innocence and so on, and how the Mirror Man best puts at it. So, yeah, Finn going to Snow White's dungeon cell, and again, by that point, she had gotten a loose nail outside from her window, in her cell, and, well, her hiding the nail under her bed and, you know, pretending that she was asleep, and, yeah, she woken up because of Finn, and Finn being kind of a creep to Snow White. Yeah. And more on Finn, because, yeah, I mean, Sam Spruell, he's really good at playing the main villain's brother. At times, he can be creepy. At times, he can be kind of dumb. Yeah, not thinking very smartly at times. You know, he has his moments. But at the same time, he loves and cares for his sister very much, and doing his very best to help his sister. And yeah, I mean, of course, he's evil like his sister, so yeah, he tries his best. But yeah, again, Finn being very creepy to Snow White, but ultimately, yeah, because and what Finn tells Snow White is that, you know, and when Snow White asks, what does the queen want with me? she wants your heart. And, well, sure enough, Snow White, she quickly stabs Finn with that loose nail, like, right around here, like, and giving him a scar. Just, that's painful. I think, like, right about here. Yeah, right there. And yeah, she escapes, locks Finn up, and she tries to help out Greta, but Greta, who looks weak and such, she tells Snow White to get out of here while she still can. Forget about her. You gotta save yourself. There's really nothing that Snow White can do for Greta for right now. So yeah, Snow White making a run for it, and her making her way through the castle, and even when, the guards, they spot and chase after Snow White, but thankfully, the birds, who are still helping out Snow White, they guide her once again to go down this one hole where, yeah, when she slides down it, into the sewer, pretty much, and that's her only way to escape, and ultimately, she finds the outside of the sewer, and yeah, a huge waterfall, and there's the ocean, and she has no choice. She jumps, and yeah, her escaping, and the guards, still attempting to go after Snow White, but thankfully, at one point, Snow White, when she's on a beach, she stumbles upon a white horse. Literally, a white horse right there, waiting for her, and thus, her riding on the white horse, making their way / escaping from the castle, while the guards, they're on her tail. And then at one point, the horse does not proceed on, because apparently, one part of these woods that is very terrifying to step foot in. Even when the guards arrive where Snow White is, even their horses won't venture on either. Because, yeah, basically, Snow White has now made her way into the dark woods. Yeah, the dark woods of Snow White and the Huntsman. The Dark Forest. That's how it's specifically called. And the Dark Forest is a location in the Kingdom of Tabor, and that's the name of the kingdom, Tabor. It is a vast forest with a sinister reputation and home to many deadly and magical creatures. Yeah, so, like I said, from the white horse that Snow White rode on, and the guards' horses, they don't want to, continue on and make their way into the dark forest because they can sense and are very well aware of what the dark forest is like. Yeah. There was even at one point where Snow White, what she was encountering so far in the dark forest, even this, like, powdery dust or something, it got into her and she was coughing it, and apparently it makes her mind go hallucive, having these illusions that are not actually there. Like, basically the dark forest coming to life, creepy hands and, wiggly things and just, yeah. But of course it's not all real, it's just an illusion. It's all being hallucinated in her mind. Her mind's hallucinating. And at one point she does collapse, but thankfully nothing bad happens to her when she regains consciousness. Meanwhile, the queen discovers that, yeah, Snow White had escaped. She's very pissed off at her brother about this, and the only way to find Snow White in the Dark Forest is to hire someone who knows about the Dark Forest, and that being the other titled character of this film, the Huntsman. Yep, the Huntsman being played by good old Chris Hemsworth, a.k.a. Thor. Yes. I'll be completely honest. When I was watching this, for a second, I was thinking, is the Huntsman William? Is this grown-up William, the Huntsman? But I quickly realized, no, it's not. Especially when we do see William a little later on. Yeah, but until I get to him. And the Huntsman, who is this drunk slob who unfortunately lost his wife, and, he's completely different by this point. Even getting in a tussle with some guys, because, he owes them something, and I believe it is him, Broch, being played by Dave Legeno, if I'm even pronouncing his last name right. Again, you know me sometimes. The Huntsman owes him and the others something, and ultimately, because he got knocked out and, well, thrown into, pool of water where, the horses drink in, And Finn and the guards approaching the drunk Huntsman, they bring him in, and the Queen ordering the Huntsman to help locate and find the girl, Snow White. But little does the Huntsman know what this is all about, and, well, didn't even know the name of the girl at first, and yeah. The Queen's not gonna let the Huntsman off the hook that easily, even telling the Huntsman that he will be handsomely paid and so on, even telling the Huntsman that she can help bring his late wife back. And he finds that impossible, and just, yeah, I mean, he at first refuses to do this. Like, if I refuse, and yeah, of course he'll be killed if he refuses. So, thus the Huntsman has no choice but to help out and to find whom the Queen needs to be brought back to the kingdom. So yeah, the Huntsman, along with Finn and some of the guards, them venturing in the dark forest, while Snow White, at one point, she regained consciousness, and yeah, thankfully nothing bad happened to her, because after what the heck just happened to her, her mind hallucinating, yeah, ultimately, and to speed things up, yeah, the Huntsman does find Snow White, and now, she's held captive and such, and gonna be brought back in, but the Huntsman still doesn't know that much on what the purpose is for bringing this girl in, and Finn, stupidly, telling, the Huntsman that, the Queen, his sister, can't really bring back his late wife, because she doesn't have that kind of magic, and just, golly. And even Snow White telling the Huntsman that, they want her dead, and, they'll kill him too. And ultimately, the Huntsman doesn't, oblige with the rest of this order, and yeah, just taking down Finn and the guards, and yeah, each Snow White and the Huntsman fleeing. And, well, thankfully, Finn was spared, but, he got a whip of that powder, that dust and such, and yeah, his mind hallucinating too, and he even shouting to the Huntsman that, "I will find you," just, yeah. And when the Huntsman catches up to Snow White, yeah, Snow White, feeling, uncomfortable towards him, and, and the Huntsman having no idea still on whom she is and what the heck this is all about, and even Snow White telling the Huntsman that she's trying to make her way to King Hammond's place, and she needs help. She then needs help from the Huntsman to venture on and head to the other kingdom and such. And the Huntsman still, acting like a drunk and so on, just, yeah, and he's not up for doing this at first, and not even trusting Snow White. But, even Snow White telling the Huntsman that he will be paid, and when they make their way to the kingdom, and, even telling him that, 100, he can be given 100. And, she gave his word to him, but he still doesn't trust him, but, still, then he then agrees to help out, and that whole thing. So, yeah, thus they adventure on, and, well, the Queen still being upset about, Snow White still not being captured, but also, coming straight to, Duke Hammond. Well, his son, William. We see William now as a, young man, and William being played by Sam Claflin, yeah. And he's quite good at, being, a bow and arrow, at bow and arrow stuff. Yep, that's what he's able to do. An archer. Thank you, archer. Yeah, I remember now. The king finds out, and when William returns, because William and a couple of others, they ambushed some of the Queen's guards and such. So when William came back, yeah, and hearing about this, where the guy who was set free by the Queen, and he unfortunately lost his son, well, he tells the Queen that about what had happened and the mentioning of the king's daughter being alive, and William, of course, knowing about this, and he is going to just, straight up go and to find and rescue Snow White, because, yeah, ever since what happened when they were kids and she was left there, yeah, and even when, he thought and it had to accept that maybe she was gone forever, but thankfully no, and even made it very clear to his father that he's not going to give up on her a second time, and thus, without any stop and so with nobody stopping him, as even his father, he ventures on his horse and going to find and save Snow White. Meanwhile, because at one point there are others who are hired to go and find Snow White, as well as the Huntsman, those who are experts and know about the Dark Forest. And Finn, well, he speaks with those in the village, and one of them, of course, being Brotch, and and they take the job and such. And, even at one point, William, he comes face to face with them, and he goes along / pretends to be on their side. Yeah, it's the only way for him to get to Snow White, because, he finds out about this very quickly, and telling them if they need a bower, an archer and such, but they already have one, and the archer they have using the bow and arrow, but he misses William, and William gets him. So now they have a new archer, which being William. So now he joins them. Meanwhile, coming back to the Huntsman and Snow White. The more they venture on in the Dark Forest, well, there's even at one point, and to speed things up still, because, well, a moment where they stumble upon and come face to face with a troll. And that sequence where the Huntsman is fighting against a troll, and it's like this rock-looking troll, almost. Well, not really, it's almost kind of looks like a tree or something, just how the troll looks specifically. And the Huntsman is having no luck trying to take on the troll, but Snow White stepping in and confronting the troll herself. And what happens is, there's this long stare. Snow White and the troll staring each other dead straight in the eyes. And somehow, Snow White managed to calm / make peace with the troll. Because, well, knowing Snow White, and it took a moment for the troll to realize and sense whom Snow White is. So thankfully, the troll doesn't do anything else, and he walks off calmly / peacefully, and so there's that. And also, still, Finn and the others, along with William, they're still adventuring on, trying to find and locate Snow White and the Huntsman. And then there's one moment where, because, how farther they've traveled through the Dark Forest, and they're at the very end of the Dark Forest, well, they stumble upon these boats where, they ask who the Huntsman and Snow White are, and they make it very clear that they are fugitives of the Queen, and so on. And doesn't take too long for them to, be taken in by them and, rowing back to, a location where they can stay for the evening. And, I think, this is them. Because one of the main villagers, Anna being played by Rachel Sterling, and her daughter, Lily, being played by young Hattie Gotobed? Is that how her last name's pronounced? Again, you know me sometimes. This very interesting group of villagers who live right near a river, and it's only the women and the children that are there. No men there. And, and nice to see that they're taken in very well, and, Anna, she knows who Snow White is, even when the Huntsman still never knew Snow White's name until now, because, yeah, thanks to Anna, off camera, we don't see this, yeah, she did tell the Huntsman everything about this girl, which being Snow White, and her being the king, the daughter to the late king, and even a sweet moment where Snow White and Lily, they're making a doll and such, and the Huntsman approaching them, telling Lily that, your mother needs you, and the Huntsman asking Snow White why she never told him about herself and so on, because, well, it's understandable when Snow White tells him that she didn't trust him at first. So, yeah. Just a little bit of dialogue that they have there, and yeah. And later that evening, the more we learn about these villagers, well, the scars. They have scars on their faces. That's because, to keep themselves protected from the queen, so she doesn't take their youth and such, their beauty. Yeah, very clever, and how Anna explains it, yeah. And, that was a sacrifice that they had to do, just, have scars on their faces, just, yeah. Be very painful, and you wouldn't, that would be hard to live with sometimes, but, yeah, that's what they had to do. Then, at one point, the Huntsman, later that evening, he disembarks. He disembarks the village, and even Anna, she tries to convince and stop the Huntsman from doing this, but the Huntsman, he just wants to keep his distance away from her because he feels that she is safe with them and so on. Just, yeah. And it's nothing really intentional that he does towards her. I mean, it's understandable what he says, but still, not really the right thing to do. And not long after he disembarked, I mean, by that point, he wasn't that far away, At one point, Finn, along with the others, they ambush and attack the village, burning their tents and trying to find and locate Snow White. And thankfully, the Huntsman, not far away from that village, he saw the fire rising, and thus he makes his way back and helps out, taking out some of those bad guys. Even a moment where William and Snow White just about make eye contact, and yeah, Snow White running for her life, and yeah, and again, the Huntsman taking on the bad guys. Even William took down one of them as well, as I recall, but yeah, anyways. And yeah, it's unfortunate what happens, but thankfully, I'm pretty sure most of those women and children living in that very own village of theirs in those tents, they all did survive, and yeah, that's nice to see. Okay, so then, after that, and when morning hits, daytime, because, Snow White being disappointed and upset towards the Huntsman for leaving her there, but, yeah, I mean, he tries to, mend things and apologize, but, yeah, and doesn't take too long for, things to be patched up and such. But not long after that, they are ambushed at one point by these masked tiny figures and such, and yeah, they are knocked out, and when they wake up, regain consciousness, they're hung upside down, and we see our 7 dwarves. Yes, this is where we finally see the 7 dwarves, and they're basically, one of them knows the Huntsman very well, and just interrogating them, and, money, gold, and such, what they say, and some of them, they want to do something to Snow White, almost considering to kill her, but one of them tells them not to. There's one that's still masked, is wearing a mask and such, but when Snow White reveals to them, and to speed things up because, overall, she reveals to them that she is the daughter of the late king, she's Snow White, and the queen, having her try to be killed, and so on. And we learned that the 7 dwarves, they have no love for the queen at all, but they did for the late king, and even like Snow White at times, knowing that, nothing was the same after the king's death and what the queen did all to the kingdom of Tabor. And even we learn later on that the 7 dwarves, they had a big part, of being a part of that kingdom. And, yeah, because when they used to be a part of that kingdom, but after the queen took over, things changed, of course, and what would happen to the 7 dwarves. And the 7 dwarves, because the 7 dwarves are a cast of 7 dwarves, there's Beef, I'm pretty sure, that is how I'm supposed to pronounce his name, and that's how they say his name, being played by the one and only Ian McShane. There's Gort, being played by good old Ray Winston. Neon, I think I'm saying that right, being played by good old Nick Frost. Durr, being played by Eddie Marison. I'm sure you know who it is, there's Cole, being played by good old Toby Jones. Quirt, being played by Johnny Harris. And Gus, being played by Brian Gleason. And I saved the 7th and final dwarf that I'm now about to mention because he gets the sense of feeling that, something about Snow White, and, because, again, revealing herself to them that, she's the daughter of the late king and such, and, he feels that something good is going to happen, and because of Snow White and such. And when he finally takes off his mask, and assuring his other fellow dwarves and such, and because of Snow White, that being if I'm even pronouncing that right, being played by the late legendary good old Bob Hoskins. Yes, a.k.a. Eddie Valiant / Mario, Mr. Smee, need I go on, And not to mention, Snow White and the Huntsman was Bob Hoskins' last movie he did before he would retire, and 2 years after he did this movie and he retired, he would sadly pass away, And I think Bob Hoskins, and that goes for the others who play the 7 dwarves, they do really good too. They're no disappointment, at least in my opinion. But and hey, that especially goes for, the talents, from Ian McShane, Bob Hoskins, Ray Winston, Nick Frost, Toby Jones. These are great British actors, and I think they did a really good job with what they brought to the performances of the 7 dwarves. And it never fails that, for the 7 dwarves, they, they're each of their different personalities, and I think that how it's done in Snow White and the Huntsman is done pretty good. Oh yeah, and there's another one that I missed, because I think, I just about got all of them, right? Because, Durr, Quirt, and Neon, and there's also Percy, being played by Matt Berry. Apparently, because Matt Berry, he is the son of Bob Hoskins' character. But that's nice to see. And I'm pretty sure, because I don't know, because I guess I didn't realize the total of dwarves at first is it 8? I'm pretty sure, because I think so. But all right, don't question. Let me just continuing with the movie. All right. So overall, things patch up between kind of for the dwarves and Snow White and the Huntsman, and thanks to Bob Hoskins' character. But at one point, Finn and the other bad guys, they're nearby, and with the help of the dwarves, they run, and along with them, Snow White and the Huntsman, still at first very mutual between them, and especially towards the Huntsman and some of Snow White to some of the dwarves, but even one of the dwarves takes a liking to Snow White, and that being Gus. They make a run for it, and still to speed things up, because they end up going into this cave, and they end up in one part of the forest / the woods where it's very calm, peaceful, beautiful. And that being the sanctuary. That's how it's referred to, the sanctuary. And the sanctuary, there's a description of it. The sanctuary is the name of the the name the dwarves give to a seemingly enchanted forest in the land of Tabor. It is the home of the fairies and a mystical being. Yeah. So it's nice to see that one part of the one part of Tabor that nothing bad has happened to it, you know? And yeah, mystical being named the White Hart, who also appears to dwell there. All right, but anyways, yeah, and we see that White Hart very later on. But later that evening, you know, they set up camp, and the more conversations that they each have, and yeah, this is where we get to know more of the dwarves, and you know, back when the king was still alive, and you know, we learned that the dwarves, point being, the dwarves were really good gold miners. But yeah, and even like this was before the king had died, and again, when the king was sadly murdered by the queen, things changed, and yeah, they are the last remaining dwarves of Tabor. And yeah, it seems as though that, yeah, things start to patch up some more between, like, you know, the Huntsman, the dwarves, and Snow White, kind of, almost. You know, especially because, you know, Toby Jones and Ray Winston, they're two dwarf characters. They're not saying nice things at first about Snow White and not trusting her at first, but yeah. And Bob Hoskins' dwarf character asks his on-screen son, to, you know, play something else. Yeah, because, you know, they can play music and sing. And that, of course, being a big part of the dwarf characters, as we all know. And Gus offering Snow White a dance. And seems like the Huntsman is kind of a bit jealous or something. Why would he? Just, yeah. But, yeah, and so them dancing some. But Gus really wanted to go for a hug, which that's sweet, yeah. But just overall, you know, the campfire that they have, and when, yeah, they're singing and dancing, it goes pretty well. Then by next morning, well, Snow White being the first to wake up, and, well, something is calling to her, and she follows this, and even the dwarves, them being awoken too, and Bob Hoskins' dwarf character being well aware of what's happening, on whom it is that Snow White is going to come face to face with, and that being, as I said, the White Hart, this white-looking deer almost, yeah, with very long antlers, and, well, Snow White interacting with the White Hart, and seeing all the other, you know, fairies and mystical creatures and such, you know, like, there's a turtle, and some of the same breed of birds that we saw early on, well, there are these, like, little fairies that, pop out of the birds. Why? I don't know, like, they were hiding behind their feathers, I guess, I don't know. But, yeah, and when the Huntsman and the dwarves, they approach, and seeing the sight of Snow White interacting with the White Hart, Bob Hoskins' dwarf character knows what this means, that she she's hope, and she can restore peace, and so on. And mentioning of gold is gold, but yeah, that doesn't matter, you know, and yeah, just overall, yeah, Snow White is indeed, and yeah, as it was mentioned, of course, and by Mirror Man, and as we learned in this movie, that yeah, only Snow White can take on the Queen and restore peace and such, and her being next in line after her late parents, yeah. But that nice moment, and when, yeah, because when Snow White interacting with the White Hart, that's all interrupted when a bow and arrow is shot and striking the White Hart, literally. Well, because Finn and the bad guys, they found them, and thus, yeah, they're in pursuit, and them scattering and running, and some of the dwarves even trying to take on them. And, well, at one point, the Huntsman, Snow White, and Gus, they make a run for it, and even the Huntsman, telling them to proceed on, while he too takes on them, and most notably Finn. William, on the other hand, well, he trying to catch up to Snow White, and yeah, because revealing to Snow White and Gus that it's him, it's William, and yeah, Snow White knowing that it is William. So yeah, now he's tagged along with them. But also, yeah, and to speed things up still, because, yeah, a moment where, yeah, we once again see the Huntsman and Finn going at it, and, well, Finn is almost beating the Huntsman and kind of wounding him and taunting him and telling him that, about him seeing his late wife again in heaven and such, and just, yeah. But, thankfully the Huntsman notices behind Finn a pointy tree stump, and, well, thus, that's the ticket to defeat Finn once and for all. And by the way, because more moments between Finn and Revena, again, they're brother and sister, yeah, and still, Revena being very upset towards her brother for not succeeding in bringing in Snow White, and yeah. And even there was a moment where we do get a bit of flashbacks with Revena, her childhood and such, and young Revena being played by young Izzy Meckley Small, and young Finn being played by young Elliot Reve. Yeah, I think I'm saying that right. And their mother, we get an appearance of their mother, Revena's mother, as she's credited, being played by Anastasia Hill, if I'm saying that right. Again, you know me sometimes. Well, for what we know very little in this, she wasn't a bad girl from the start, and, well, that's because, with the magic and power that was, put into her, and with the whole thing of beauty and such, and what would happen to, young Revena and young Finn, their poor mother, and, losing everything, and the horrible life that they were living at first, just, yeah, not really good. But, yeah, and coming back to where I was, because, yeah, Finn being defeated by the Huntsman, yeah, because the Huntsman defeating Finn once and for all, stabbing him through a pointy tree stump, and Revena, she can sense her brother being murdered and such, and, calling out to her brother, forgive me, and she's on the floor, and she's just moving around, just like, golly, the pain that she can feel, not to mention that she's starting to look old and such, frail, and, yeah, because doesn't have anybody else to take their youths and so on, just, yeah. But yeah, overall, Finn is defeated once and for all, and he too growing frail and old, and yeah, again, overall, that's the end and defeat for Finn. But also, coming back to Snow White, Gus, and William, well, one of the archers was almost about to kill Snow White, but thankfully Gus, he intervened and he took the arrow. And yeah, should have seen that coming, and well, should have seen it coming where, yeah, Gus, he doesn't make it. He's the only dwarf to die in this movie, and now it's reduced to 7, I'm pretty sure. 7 fingers. Yeah. And Snow White being very emotional about this, because even, she was starting to like Gus too, probably just as a friend, but yeah. And even, I'm pretty sure, yeah, she can sense the fact on how very caring and nice that Gus was. Even from the start. And, yeah, it's very sad. And, well, we then see all of them having a funeral for poor Gus. The speech that's made to Gus, and, a song that they sing, and just, yeah, it's very emotional. But, even after Gus sadly died, they still proceed on with what they're going to do. Head to the kingdom where, Hammond is and such. But the next morning, and it's winter, well, yeah, because, and them still continuing their journey, Snow White awake and kind of like wandering off some, but then at one point her coming face to face with William, him tagging along with her, and and also like William feeling very bad and feeling and apologizing to Snow White for not saving her when they were kids. But Snow White assures William that, they were just kids, and there was really nothing he can do at that time. And, obviously she knew that, for William, that how was he supposed to know that she was still alive, But, yeah, overall, it's cleared up. No big deal. Just, yeah. And, the more interactions that they have now that they're older, and even William, him having feelings for Snow White, even the Huntsman encouraging her to, talk with Snow White. And apparently, yeah, he does so. But it gets a bit suspicious even when, even after they share a kiss, he offers her an apple, and she recalls when they were kids, that trick he pulled, but yeah. But not this time. He's not doing it. And her taking the apple and biting on it. But something happens after she eats that apple. And should have seen it coming because, something in the apple that causes her to collapse and fall to sleep. And, the sleeping death and such, and, geez, why did William do... What drove William to do this all of a sudden? But thankfully... it's not William, thankfully. Because, as I just said, William, what are you doing? I was thinking of the same thing, too. Why is William, because, and I'm sure some of you, any of you that have seen this movie, thought of that at first, but thankfully, we do see, and when the Huntsman realizes that Snow White is nowhere to be seen, he wakes up William. William is still right there at the campsite, and, them going to find, them awake and finding Snow White, and, if it's not William, then who it is? Who is it? Well, if you couldn't tell immediately, it's the Queen herself, Ravenna, in disguise. Yep. Her interrogating Snow White and, attempting to try to take her heart. But thankfully, the Huntsman and William, they stepped in. They tried to stop Ravenna, but, she got away quickly. And also, with the aid of these magical crows and her transforming into a swarm of crows almost, and even when she got back to the kingdom, she was all muddy and so on, and still looking very frail and weak and trying to go for the magic mirror, but anyways, Snow White, now that she's eaten the apple, she's completely unconscious, and even William, he does kiss her, and I'm pretty sure, he might have known that, maybe true love's kiss could work, but it doesn't work for William, which is a shame. I mean, because he did have feelings for her, but, it's a shame. And what now? Well, they made a promise that, they will proceed, and, taking Snow White with them. Eventually and finally, they make their way to the kingdom, and everybody there, including the king, seeing that they have arrived, and, the perilous Snow White, unconscious Snow White, I should say, and, Snow White laid on a bed in a white dress, and, a moment where the Huntsman is very emotional and speaking to the lifeless body of Snow White, and, he brings up to Snow White about his late wife, and telling Snow White that when he looks at her, Snow White reminds him of his late wife, and, ever since, and further on when they were together and the adventure they had, he started to, take a liking in Snow White and the feelings that he too having for Snow White, how he puts at it. And he, shares a kiss on Snow White, on her lips, and, after he does that, he walks off, emotionally still. Snow White wakes up. That worked. It was the Huntsman. And was that not obvious too, that maybe more than likely the Huntsman kissing Snow White would work? And sure enough, it did. And a moment between William and his father, and, telling his father that Snow White was the answer to there being peace and such, being restored and such, but, even the father, he's not sure about this, and, telling his son that the grief is blinding him, but William sets his father straight that the grief has made him, be tougher or something, how he puts at it. And it doesn't take too long for everyone to see and discover that Snow White is awake. And Snow White, and speed things up because, Snow White, who's now awake, she's not going to give up still, and is still going to fight and take revenge on her late father and to go against the queen. And Snow White making this pretty good speech to everybody in the kingdom, and, well, all of them bowing to Snow White, and thus, the fight and battle is soon about to begin. Snow White getting all geared up, and that goes for everyone else. Only Bob Hoskins' dwarf character remains at the kingdom, while the other dwarves, they tag along with Snow White and the others. And yeah, it's really cool, and this is where we finally see Snow White in full gear. Just, yeah, in knight armor, and yeah, awesome. And thus, then proceeding to the Kingdom of Tabor to come face to face and to take down, once and for all, Revena. And yeah, Revena being aware of this at one point, and yeah, yeah, her and her army getting prepared for when they show up, and yeah, and them outside, when they finally arrive and they're outside of the castle, well, at one point the dwarves, they're going through the sewers, and they're basically going to attempt to open the gate and such. Yeah. Meanwhile, the guard / army of the queens, well, the weapons that they set up, like, firing balls of fire at them and such, and they're trying their best to take on the army that's trying to defeat them while, they're still trying to get inside the castle. Thankfully, the dwarves, and even when they take on some of the bad guys, eventually they do get the doors open, yeah. And, well, sure enough, Snow White and the army, they make their way inside, and yeah, the battle happening where, yeah, they're taking on, Revena's guards and her men, and even the dwarves. Like, to talk more about the dwarves, because, yeah, it never fails that, yeah, the dwarves being the comic relief, and yeah, they have funny moments here and there, even when, yeah, they're sneaking their way through the castle to open the gates, and yeah, and even when they join in the battle. So yeah, even at one point we get a bit of Wilhelm, the Wilhelm scream. Yeah, it's in there. I found out about that even before I watched the movie. I looked at some of the trivia on its IMDb page, and yeah, so I knew before watching. And how can you not miss the Wilhelm scream? Seriously, just, yeah. And Snow White, well, her proceeding on inside the castle to come face to face with Revena, and thus she does. But at first, she's unstoppable. Even when the Huntsman and William and the others, they come in, they help try to take on Revena, but they're no match for her, especially with the magic / power that she has, taking on them. And when, yeah, Snow White is trying to take on Revena, she's having no luck at first, and yeah, and when at one point, and to speed things up still, because yeah, Revena has Snow White pinned down to the floor, and well, her attempt to try to take her heart and defeat Snow White once and for all, thankfully, Snow White manages to stab Revena. And yeah, when that happens, Revena starts to become weak, and then she, soon then grows old, frail, and yeah, Snow White being the only way and the answer to defeat the villain herself, Revena, and thus that's what happens. And Snow White was a bit emotional when, yeah, she defeated Revena. Well, I get it, and it's understandable, without any dialogue and words, we know exactly why, just, yeah, and with her getting emotional, when, yeah, Revena does die, because, yeah, Revena finally dies, and even with the last bit of dialogue that she has, and, yeah, that's the end / demise for Revena herself. And even one moment where Snow White looks at her reflection in the magic mirror, and nothing else happens to the magic mirror. Like, that's just that. Yeah, because again, as I said, Snow White looking at her reflection, and that's it. And, oh, I did forget to mention that there was one moment, and before the battle took place and before they showed up, well, there was a moment where we did see Revena. She managed to take more youths and such from all the other maidens. Yeah. But, yeah, again, overall, Revena does get defeated at the very end. So, yeah. And the ending / epilogue to this, well, now that the queen is defeated, peace and everything to the kingdom of Tabor is officially and finally restored. Now Snow White is next in line, and thus her being the next rightful queen of the kingdom of Tabor. And everybody who's there, from all the dwarves, and, well, even Bob Hoskins' dwarf characters there, and of course William, as well as Anna and her daughter Lily, they're there as well. Even Greta's there too. She managed to survive and look young and beautiful once again. Even one of the dwarves, sang and starting this, this chant, "All hail the queen!" And yeah, everybody joining in, "All hail the queen!" And the Huntsman way back, and even because, him kind of smiling, and just, and Snow White too, and I wonder, because surely, probably, Snow White would end up being with William, I guess, because we never see this, and when the movie ends, we don't get this, who is going to be king right next to her? William or the Huntsman? It's hard to tell. The movie doesn't establish that, because right after they chant and the camera pans out, a long shot, and the doors close, that's it. The movie ends right there. So, yeah, okay, but I guess it leaves us wondering that maybe it was either William or the Huntsman that one of them became king. It doesn't establish that. But, yeah, just overall, it was a nice way for this movie to end. Yeah. But, Snow White and the Huntsman, it's really good. Like I said, I enjoyed this. I didn't think it was that bad. I liked it from beginning to end. The story, the cast of characters, and, the great talents of, say, Kristen Stewart, Chris Hemsworth, Charlize Theron, the late legendary Bob Hoskins. I almost said Bill. Gotta slow down. Bob Hoskins, Nick Frost, Toby Jones. Need I go on? This film had great visuals and, visual effects. The look and style and setting of this Snow White live-action film. Rupert Sanders' direction, the costume and wardrobe, the fight sequences, the action, the adventure, the climax, unexpected moments, funny and emotional moments here and there, and some of the songs, they were pretty good too. There's "I'll Take Your Throne," because I'm pretty sure I'm looking at it correctly. Because some of the songs that the dwarves sing, and, the song that plays during the end credits, and the music and score, pretty good too. Overall, Snow White and the Huntsman, I think, is not that bad. Enjoyable, fun, entertaining, a pretty good, decent, live-action Snow White film. And I'm giving Snow White and the Huntsman, this sounds about right. And, again, because how I've said I've enjoyed this, and I think it's not that bad. I'm giving it, 7 out of 10 stars. Yes, 7 out of 10 stars for Snow White and the Huntsman. And what about you guys? What did you think of Snow White and the Huntsman itself? Any of you that had seen this and was aware of this when it came out in 2012? Do you remember seeing the trailers, promos? Any of you that got to see/experience this in theaters? Did you enjoy this like I did? Do you think it's not that bad? Just, who were some of your favorite characters and whom was in this? Your favorite moments that you weren't expecting? Did you get good laughs, chuckles, get a bit emotional? Just overall, what do you think of Snow White and the Huntsman itself, and with what I've had to say, my review, and what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Snow White and the Huntsman. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward. And I'll see you guys in the next video / review. And, well, there's one more film for me to review, a part of Snow White Movie Week. Stay tuned later tonight, because if it's not obvious, and I think this technically counts, because it is, something Snow White related, and it is canon. It is canon to Snow White and the Huntsman. And it's in fact a prequel to Snow White and the Huntsman. Is it not obvious? Yeah. Overall, again, stay tuned for that. The last film that I'll be reviewing, a part of Snow White Movie Week, The Huntsman, Winter's War. Again, you know what's next. It's obvious. Yeah. Take care, and peace out.